Debate on the Bigot amendment. The gentleman from North Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I certainly support the Bigot alternative to the underlying legislation. What we have here today is another government program on top of plenty of government programs involved with financial services generally. We have a new regulator on top of the many regulators that we currently have. What this is a solution that will create a greater problem in the end. You'll empower an agency to look out for simply consumer protection, but with disregard to the safety and soundness of institutions. The crisis we had that we've faced as a country over the last year and a half did not arise simply out of consumer protection issues. It was a safety and soundness issue. And when you separate safety and soundness from consumer protection, you lead to greater problems. So we've also had discussion here earlier today and in the debate that we've had here over the last 2 days, and we'll continue to have, about what caused the financial meltdown of last year. And there's this contention from my colleagues on the other side of the aisle and many in the press that it was a lack of regulation. It was deregulation of the financial services industry that caused the problem. Well, it's just simply not true. The reason we had this problem is not a lack of regulation or a lack of regulators. We have the SEC, we have the OCC, we have the FDIC, we have the OTS, we have NCUA. You name, on top of the Federal Reserve and on top of bank supervisors at the state level and every different level of regulation across this country. And yet we hear from politicians that we don't have enough regulation. We don't have enough in the way of regulators. It boggles the mind. Perhaps it's not a lack of regulation, but dumb regulation that led to the problem. The fact that the government proscribed what the financial industry must do, and in the end caused systemic risk issues to the point now where the federal government's going to deem certain institutions as too big to fail and therefore have this implicit guarantee from the federal government that the federal government will step in and bail them out. And yet at the same time they're going to say, well, we'll fix that through regulation, that, you know, perhaps if we regulate those big institutions so much that will restrict their size and there'll be fewer too big to fail institutions, which of course isn't reasonable either, because the financial markets are so much more powerful than federal regulation. And the financial markets will give lower lending costs to those big institutions because they have that implicit federal government guarantee and they won't be able to fail. What we have here today with this so-called consumer protection agency will not help consumers. In fact, by the fact that you'll have a government regulator that will have to approve products, it will restrict product offerings to consumers and will restrict credit, similar to the bill passed by this Congress and signed by the President earlier this year that restricted people's access to credit card funding. So when the American people get notices in the mail that the credit card companies are raising their interest rate and cutting their credit line, well, you can thank the legislation this Congress passed in helping propel that even faster and restrict credit even more. And what we have here is an agency that will restrict credit, will restrict new products from being offered, innovation in the private sector and in the financial marketplace, and in the end, it will hurt consumers, not help them. This is a credit constriction agency, not a consumer protection agency. I support the Republican alternative, and I hope that my colleagues will find it reasonable to do so as well. Thanks so much.